Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns are back from their bye and still 2-7. They play in New Orleans on Sunday, and Jameis Winston will be at quarterback, and Jedrick Wills Jr. will not be at left tackle. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Yeah, just kicking back, enjoying the bye until, as you promised, you contacted me for a little work this week. So, but no, just kidding, Scott. You know I love you. You know I love doing it. But Scott, I was looking at it. I kind of forgot about it until I was looking at the remaining schedule. How about all the primetime games that the Browns still have left?
Oh, I know. And you know what? I don't think we're going to see all those, Chud, because they can flex out of them. But I mean, next Thursday they host Pittsburgh, so it's Sunday, Thursday, and I try to go week to week, so I wasn't like I knew that it was coming up, but I kind of forgot it was next week. So you get a short week before Pittsburgh. Then they're supposed to go Monday night in Denver, which would mean it's like a week and a half between games. I don't know if that gets flexed. It's not a super attractive matchup, but it's also Thanksgiving weekend, so the NFL schedule's kind of spread thin because of the games on Thursday, game on Friday. So we'll see if they flex that. I can't imagine the Sunday night Browns-Dolphins game is going to stay on Sunday night, whenever that is.
No
Right?
chance.
No chance, right. So, but we're still going to have a couple. We get the Pittsburgh one. Sure, we'll have the Thursday night game in Cincinnati, right? I think there's one of those. So we're going to have a couple prime times for sure, just not as many as originally thought.
Refresh my memory on the Monday night flex, because that used to not be the case, but now you can flex out of Monday night.
You can. Yeah, I think you can flex. I should know this rule, Chud. I think you can flex out of every game. Maybe not Thursday night, but you used to not be able to flex. It used to be only Sundays, but now you can flex out of a whole bunch. Like you can flex out of Sunday afternoon if it's the spotlight game. The NFL has a lot more flexibility to do that nowadays. But it's still hard. Like there has to be the perfect matchup to switch. You have to, like CBS or Fox can't have that game locked in for, in order for it to switch to a prime time game. If you're going to switch, want to add a different game. So there's some rules to it, but the goal is that, everybody watching in prime time is not getting a dog game, which, Cleveland, Miami in December sure looks like a dog game.
Oh yeah, no question. I can't imagine that one sticking around for sure. Well, let's look at the schedule real quick before we get into the topics. But so we got at Saints versus the Steelers on Thursdays, you mentioned, at Broncos, the Monday night game, at the Steelers versus Kansas City at home. And then do they finish 3 straight on the road? Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens?
Dolphins is home.
Dolphins is home. All right. I don't know why I put at there. All right. Yeah. Dolphins is home. So 2 out of the last 3 are on the road. Scott, looking at that, and we don't really like to play schedule game when the schedule comes out, but just looking at this now, I kind of went down and without really pinpointing each game necessarily, I kind of broke it up. So that's 8 games left. I'm thinking they go 2-6 the rest of the way. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. It's interesting. I hadn't played that. I hadn't gone through it like that, Chud. I knew it was hard. I knew the back end, right? We talked all offseason about the Browns need to make hay early in the season, early in the schedule, and obviously they did not do that. I'd probably put the over-under 2.5. Could they get to 3? Sure. Could you beat Miami in December if Miami's out of it? Yeah. New Orleans is a winnable game. I think home versus Pittsburgh. I know how well Pittsburgh's playing. It's a Thursday night. Pittsburgh plays the Ravens this week, so they're coming off that huge game. I would say that's a winnable game. But so I would put it at 2.5, Chud. I might lean toward 3 because I'm an optimistic sort of guy. But I'll tell you what, I don't think the Browns are favored, with the exception of that Miami game. I think that's the only chance they have to be favored the rest of the season because they're 2.5-point underdogs to a bad New Orleans team.
Yeah, but 2 is back, and they just beat the Rams last night, and the Rams were favored. And by the way, that was a trap. my family picks. I do the family picks I've
Yeah.
talked about. I took the Rams when I put my picks in like last Wednesday because, we only do 6 games. It's kind of fun. We do Thursday night, Monday night. So the first game and the last game, the Browns game, and then 3 games of your choice.
Okay.
And I took the Rams off the bat. And about an hour before the game last night, I just had this feeling. I didn't listen to anybody. I just said, you know what? Why is that line only 2.5? This is a trap. And I switched it to Miami, and I'm glad I did. I mean, they won straight up.
Yeah, there you go. So you got to be. You're right about it. There's so many of those trap games, but then there's every once in a while you get one of those trap games that feels like a trap, and like Arizona, the Jets. I think the Jets were favored, and it felt like why would the Jets be favored? And then Arizona, killed them.
Wow.
So, but you're right. There's so many of those games.
How many people lost money taking the Falcons over the Saints?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, you're right. I'm sure if the spread came out right now, the Dolphins would be favored over the Browns. I'm just saying, I can't imagine a whole lot of circumstances that change any of those for the Browns to be favored. I mean, even if Joe Burrow got hurt, the Browns would probably be the underdog at Cincinnati. But if Tua got hurt or Miami's out of it, I could see a scenario where the Browns are the favorite. I can't see another scenario, unless the Browns get crazy hot, where they would be favored the rest of the season, which is mind-boggling, given where we started the season.
Yeah, 2-7 right now at the bye. So I'm gonna say, I'm just throwing it out there. I agree. They could win 3, but they could also only win 1.
Yeah.
But I'll put them at 4-13. They're gonna win a game again that you don't expect them to win, like the Ravens. That could be one of the Steelers games. Wouldn't it be so Browns-like to the Chiefs come in undefeated and the Browns beat the Chiefs?
Sure.
That'd be something, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Go ahead.
But yeah, Chud, now you have me thinking, and it's been in the back of my head all along. But so let's say they win 2 more games, and it's 4-13. Then then you're talking about, do you change coaches? Do you change GMs? I think there's a number, and I think we've referred to this in the past on these pods recently. But if they had 8 games left, if they go 5-3, they're not making a change, right? I mean, it feels to me like that would calm things down. You get to 7 wins, maybe even at 4-4 after the bye. Okay, they found some footing, they recovered a little bit, but if you're talking 4-13 at the end of the season, I mean, that's rough. And if it's worse than that, those are the kind of seasons that lead to change. I'm not saying it should lead to change. I'm not saying it will lead to change. But those are the type of seasons when you go 3-14, 2-15, where big change could happen.
Well, Scott, let me ask you this. We all assume Haslam's the reason that they wanted Watson, but we also hear that Andrew Berry, I mean, do we know for sure? I mean, they say publicly they were all in on it together, but someone had to be the ringleader, right? Do we know who the ringleader is? I mean,
no.
Will that ever come out? So,
no, go on. I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, all right. So let's say Barry was the ringleader and went to Haslam and said, "We got to get Watson." Well, then how do you not fire the guy? But if Haslam's the ringleader, maybe he has some sympathy and says, "You know what? This is on me. These 2 guys have proven that they've gotten us to the playoffs. Stefanski's done it twice. He's been coach of the year twice. Maybe it's on me. Maybe I give him a break." Like, since we don't really know that, it's hard to really guess how that will go down.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I do think there was truth to last week when Andrew Berry was asked point blank that question and said it was all of us. I don't think they make that big a move without everybody being on board. Now, I think you have a great point that somebody was probably driving that bus. And I've always, assumed or concluded that it was the Haslams, but I don't know that. Maybe the mandate was, maybe everybody inside the building agreed we need to step up a quarterback. Baker's not the guy. And then it's Andrew Berry's job to go find the options. And it was decided that Deshaun Watson was the best option. And I understand at the time, you could understand that from a football perspective. Certainly you could. Now, looking back, it's a terrible decision, worst trade in history, all those things. but I can see how all of them could have gotten on board, at least from a football perspective, take the off the field stuff out of it, where he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, led the league in passing, all those things that maybe nobody's arm needed to be twisted. And it was, hey, let's go get this guy. If we can come to grips with the off-field stuff, he's the answer. And I understand why they would have done it. Obviously, it's been an abject failure. So I guess my point is that if they're all involved in that, then maybe they can't point fingers. And maybe the Haslam's understand the thinking, and it wouldn't come down to that. The problem is there's bigger issues than just Deshaun Watson. And that's what could bring down everybody is, we're going to talk about it, but Jed Wills. Jed Wills is now, not that he hasn't been, but he's certainly now a X. If you're going pros and cons for Andrew Berry, Jedrick Wills is a con. And if you do that with his entire roster, that's the kind of things that maybe Paul DePodesta is looking at, and the Haslam's are certainly looking at when you're evaluating your general manager. Is the roster as good as he said it was? Is it as good as everyone thought it was? And then it's just Kevin Stefanski doing enough with this talent. All those major questions that get asked. And yes, Deshaun Watson hovers over all of them, rightly so, but it could go even beyond that, I guess is my point.
Well, this was on my list for later on. It was kind of how I thought we'd end it, but let's just keep it going and get this topic out of here then. Basically, the future of Stefanski and Berry. And, a lot of people wonder, Stefanski, no one really believes that he gave up the play calling on his own. Maybe he did, but I don't think everyone believes that. So a lot of people wonder, why is he being such a good soldier? But, talking with some people, I've kind of heard that, and I don't know this to be factual, but it's around that, Stefanski, if he loses his job here, he's just going to wind up somewhere like Philadelphia and end up coming out on top anyway. Like, I think that's why he's playing the role he's playing. What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think it's correct that he knows how smart he is. He knows how good he is. He knows how impressive his resume is. So I think in the back of his head, he knows he'll be okay. And whether or not that means he gets another chance to be a head coach, who knows? It's a weird league. Pat Shurmur got a second chance. Romeo Crennel got a second chance. Guys get second chances. Not everybody does. Some people would. I would assume Kevin Stefanski would. So even if that's in the back of his head, that's fine. But there are the realities of the situation. He doesn't want to be fired. He wants this to work. I don't think I think he gave up the play calling on his own. I really do. I think it was just nothing else is working. Let's try this. Now there could be other factors that, hey, Ken Dorsey, people want to see Ken Dorsey be the guy. Let's let him have a chance. He's not going to be better than me as a play caller. Maybe that's in the back of Kevin's head somewhere. But I really do think that he's trying to win games. He's a good company man. He's trying to do what's best for this team. But I think you're right that he has a soft landing if it ever comes to that.
Man, I don't know. I have a hard time believing he did that on his own. But I don't know if we'll ever really know. But it was odd timing, Scott, with the switch of the quarterback. And
I get it. I just don't, like, Andrew Berry has praised Stefanski as a play caller. So unless there's some kind of divide there now, I don't think it would have come from him. And I don't know, maybe the Haslam's are that involved or that intrusive that Jimmy shows up at practice one day and goes, hey, maybe we should try something else. Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, I guess bottom line is it's really hard to really predict the future when we don't know the rest of the story on the season, and we don't know what else will come out in the end. So I guess if you were a betting man, would you have a guess either way?
I think Stefanski stays. I just think I think he's done too good a job in his career, in his time with Cleveland. I think he has been the most sabotaged by Watson, and Watson couldn't run his offense well enough. We've seen the success Stefanski's had without Watson. You mentioned the playoff trips. I think Stefanski's safe. I think Barry could be in trouble. How we'll have to see how this season plays out. I know how much the Haslams respect and like Andrew Barry. Like, there's a genuine love of Andrew Barry. Like, I get it every time we talk to him, talk to the Haslams. But again, if things go totally off the rails and you start looking at this roster and you start looking at the dead salary cap, the Browns, the salary cap hits they have, not only for Watson, they have salary cap hits for guys that aren't going to be on this roster. Jedrick Wills is a salary cap hit. Zadarius Smith is a salary cap hit. And I know there's reasons for that. But I think if you're the Haslams and you're going, oh my gosh, we're so hamstrung because of moves XYZ or, trades XYZ or whatever, I think that would be an easier break to make with Barry. But then you get into the whole can of worms of, would you bring a new GM and you stick him with an old coach, right? Like, all those things would be in place. Yeah. So, right now, I guess I would, if I were going to guess, I would guess that they keep the status quo and everybody comes back and this is seen as an aberration. But I certainly think that could change.
Yeah, I go back to Barry's press conference, and I really believe he feels like if they can find a quarterback in the draft, they can find that piece that they can turn this around. Now, he doesn't get to make that decision on whether he stays, but if he can convince Haslam of that, and your points to Stefanski, I wouldn't be surprised if they stay. Now, you do hear people say, hey, someone's got to pay for this crime. And when I mean crime, I mean this season, right? So I don't know. I don't know who ends up paying the price, but if someone doesn't pay the price, then they at least have to come out and say, hey, listen, we messed up on the Watson thing didn't go the way we thought it would, and we got to figure it out. We got to regroup. Maybe something like that. Could that be their penance, admitting to their mistake?
I love how you phrase that. Yes. Yes, because I get the frustration and the anger from fans. And I get that. I get how bad it is. But I also think you have to take a big picture view sometimes. And this franchise is despite 2-7, I would argue the franchise is in a much better spot than it was when these guys were hired in 2020. And they've stabilized things. And the roster has been good. And they've been to the playoffs twice. All those things. Or we can argue about the roster being good, but I think the roster is better than they inherited. So does somebody really need to pay for this? I don't know. I think that feels almost vindictive to say somebody has to pay for this bad season. That doesn't always have to be the case. Sometimes you have a bad season as a team. And if you trust, people are going to hate this, but if you trust the process, if you trust the people, then you have to be willing to live with the big valley. And we'll see. You could see, I don't think it'll be status quo. I think there'll be roster changes. You could see coaching change, staff changes outside of Kevin Stefanski. I could certainly think that. I don't think they go, hey, we were perfect this year. We just got a couple bad breaks. But I don't know if you need to blow up the biggest parts of it.
Yeah. Well, Scott, two of the things that I've said that I've been pretty steadfast on during these podcasts with you is the defense not being as elite as everyone says, and is the roster as talented as everyone thinks? Is it talented? Absolutely. But is it, I do think it's definitely talent. I mean, they made the playoffs last year. Right. So, but that's where I think there's confusion, where I think fans and people and media, people get confused, right? There's enough talent to get you to the playoffs, but this roster isn't talented enough to win a Super Bowl. I've never believed that. And I think that's where that's where they need more, Scott.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chud. And it's tough because the defense hasn't lived up to its standard in its expectations. You're 100% right about that. But when I break it down position by position, it's safety. I guess I could point to safety and say safety's not good enough, especially Juan Thornhill. And the Browns, they admitted a mistake when they signed John Johnson III. They cut him with a bunch of salary cap, They had to take a big salary cap hit there. I think they paid him not to be here. And then they go and get Juan Thornhill, and with injuries and even his play, has not had any kind of impact. So I'll give you that spot. But like when you look at the rest of the defense, Denzel Ward's really good. Martin Emerson Jr. hasn't played up to his past this season, and that's hurt this team. We can talk about Greg Newsome. So those two guys have hurt them this year. I would say Newsome and Emerson. JOK is really good when he's on the field. Their front four, I think, is good enough, or plenty good enough. And we know about Myles Garrett. So, it's like a piece here, a piece there. I think where the biggest deficiency is in the skill position, the receivers. Like, are they giving the quarterback enough talent at the receiver spot? And if you don't have an elite quarterback, that shows up. And that's one of my biggest issues with Watson, is he is supposed to raise all those guys around him. And he never did. And Joe Flacco did. We saw huge games from Amari Cooper, huge games from David Njoku. Elijah Moore came on. But if you don't have that elite quarterback, which they didn't with Watson and they certainly don't with Winston, then you need better receiving talent. And Barry's just struggled to accumulate that since he's been here. His draft picks haven't been good. He's done okay with the Amari Cooper trade. The Elijah Moore trade hasn't done anything. Maybe Cedric Tillman is the one receiver that he can point to. He's had a couple good games. But yeah, I think you're right overall, Chad, that the roster is good, and if everything is clicking, you can say, oh my gosh, it's a really good roster. But there's certainly enough major deficiencies that have let this team down.
Now, I will say this: if you get an elite quarterback, that elite quarterback could take this roster to the Super Bowl. I do believe that.
I do
yeah.
too. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Real quick, what's going to happen at defensive end here with Za'Darius traded?
Yeah, you're going to see a lot more Isaiah McGuire and a lot more Obo Okoronkwo. McGuire's a bigger guy. He's like 6'4", 268. And Obo's 6'3", 250. Obo's more of a pass rusher. So it would not surprise me if you see McGuire start. He was a fourth-round pick in 2023. He's shown flashes. Had a forced fumble earlier this year. I think he's got half a sack. He's shown up after not doing a whole lot as a rookie. And they're going to see a lot more of him. See if he can be one of the guys in the rotation. Obviously, Alex Wright is done for the season with, I think it's a torn triceps. So he's not out there. But those are a couple guys that should be in the rotation moving forward. You see Obo a lot on passing downs. And then they really only have those three guys. They're going to have to call somebody up off the practice squad to be their fourth end.
Stefanski spoke yesterday. Listen to it. I'm going to just throw out three nuggets that if there's anything else you really think that we haven't talked about yet from Stefanski that I don't bring up here, let me know. But the three things that, kind of stood out to me was he said the goal is to win the rest of the way out. I know that sounds silly, but, he was asked, hey, are you guys, is the goal to win? Or basically he wasn't asked if you're going to tank, but you know what I'm getting at. He's basically saying the goal is to win. The other thing is Winston is the guy. He's going to start this week, and unless something happens the rest of the way, right? And then the third thing, Nick Chubb, they feel that he's getting better and better as he gets more comfortable, and they feel confident where he is. Those are the kind of three things I'll throw at you from Stefanski yesterday.
Yeah, those are the big ones. The answer about winning, the goal being winning, was versus playing a bunch of young guys. Do you get to the point where you just play maybe a Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback? Obviously, they're already making the move to, Isaiah McGuire is going to play more at defensive end. You could go up and down the roster and find maybe certain spots where you go, okay, do you put a young guy here? Do you put a young guy here? Now, I think people just view it as, hey, you're 2-7, let's get a look at everybody. The fact is, there's not that many guys that you could say that about. You talk about corner. Cam Mitchell is next in line at corner. He's already played a good amount as a rookie and again this year because they rotate guys, because Denzel Ward has missed time or Greg Newsome has missed time. So he's been out there. Now, could you start him and see, okay, how does he handle every snap? You could do that. But the Stefanski's point, and Barry said the same thing last week, is the goal is to win. It's not to get a look at, guys 40 through 48 on the roster, or whatever numbers those are. Now, you're seeing more of Cedric Tillman because they traded Amari Cooper, and you're going to see the same thing about Isaiah McGuire. So there will be certain instances of that, certain examples of that. And they said if a guy earns a longer look, then you'll see that. So maybe you see Jamari Thrash, the rookie receiver, start to get more playing time because they see him show up at practice. So you can see that, but it's not like they're going to go, let's full in, let's just evaluate everybody. And that includes a quarterback where he said they're going to stick with Winston. And, I thought it was a little bit funny. The question was, are you sticking with Winston? Yes. And then it was, for the duration or week to week? And Stefanski goes, yes, yes. So he wants, the goal is to go with Winston the whole time, with the understanding that if Winston plays terribly or the season really gets away from him, they can make a move to DTR. So he's not marrying himself to Winston forever. It's just that's the plan, is to stick with Winston. And then the Chubb thing was interesting because I think we talked about this last week, Chud. I have doubts about Nick Chubb right now, if he's going to get close to being the player he was. Now, I think the bye week was good for him, and we're going to see if over these last 8 weeks he begins to shake off that rust and get more comfortable and confident and get back to being the Nick Chubb that he was. And Stefanski gave him a vote of confidence yesterday, and we're just going to have to see if Stefanski's right about that.
All right, and then the big story, Jed Wills. So he says he was blindsided by the decision to bench him, and he was benched in this last game after he sat himself the game before. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, he said he was shocked. I think he said pretty shocking that they benched him. And the key points of this is he used the word business decision. And he played against the Bengals on October 20th. First snap, he hyperextends the knee. And he stays in the game and plays all 84 offensive snaps. After the game, he's having pain. He gets examined. There's fluid on the knee. It's swollen. He just doesn't feel right. Doesn't practice Wednesday. Doesn't practice Thursday. Tries, tests it on Friday. Doesn't like how it feels. Doesn't practice. The medical staff, and this is according to Wills, he's talking to the medical staff, and they're like, well, is this the kind of thing where we can wait until maybe game time, see if he can go? And he's like, no. He goes, I can't play this week. And he said he declared himself out. And, well, that's paraphrasing. But he said, I made the decision. It was a business decision not to play. And business decision has so many negative connotations. It's when guys don't tackle a guy. It's they make a business decision, right? They get out of the way. That it just hits your ears wrong in an NFL locker room covering this team for a guy to call it a business decision. Now, he explained that he was injured and that the knee wasn't right, and he did not want to go out there 70% and hurt the team and be worrying about the knee. And you got a guy that can come in and who's healthy, and that's DeJuan Jones. So I think if you phrase it like that, hey, I didn't want to hurt the team. I didn't feel I could play up to what I needed to play. That sounds better than the words business decision. That phrase, because everybody in the NFL is hurt. And we know the offensive line, they're a different breed. Like, they play through pain. It's a badge of honor. So for an offensive lineman to kind of take himself out of the game, it's tough. Like, I think it leaves a bad impression on everybody, including his teammates. Now, if the teammates understand that he was in fact hurt and business decision was just maybe a poor use of words, then that's one thing. But you know that Joe Bitonio plays through a lot of stuff. You know that Joe Thomas spent his whole career playing through stuff. Wyatt Teller, all these guys. Ethan Posick keeps coming back from injuries. So if they thought that Jed Wills was really hurt and couldn't play, that's one thing. If they thought he was just banged up and could play through it, then that's another thing. And I think his teammates would treat both those circumstances differently.
So what's the future hold for him?
Yeah, or he's going to be gone after 8 weeks. Yeah, and we've talked about it a million times on here, Chud. I have a soft spot for Jed Wills. I think some of the criticism that's been levied upon him is unfair. When I go back and watch the games, I watch every snap of his separate than the play, just to see because so many people criticize him. And it's not perfect, and I get his body language is bad. I get like I would never say he's lived up to the number 10 pick. I would never say that he's a perfect player. There are certainly effort issues with Jed Wills, and if you want to say that those are unforgivable, that's fine. I'll listen to that argument. I just think he's been a better player than people have given him credit for. Now, he was terrible in that Bengals game. He said, he was dealing with the knee injury while he played. Maybe that was part of it. He had the terrible blown assignment when Trey Hendrickson came clean. But my point is, I've always defended him. I think he's better than people give him credit for. I think he's a legitimate player in this league. But he has issues. And the issues are effort. The issues are body language, inconsistency of performance. And the Browns, it got to the point where it looked like the Browns weren't going to give him an extension anyway. He's in the last year of his rookie contract. If he had kept going last year, he was playing pretty well until he tore that MCL and had to miss, I think it was the last 9 or 7 games. There was a chance if he had finished that season strong, maybe they extend him. But once that happens, he's slow to come back this year. Some issues this year. We already know that. Then you have the business decision. Then you have DeJuan Jones steps in, and they're going to see how he can do it left tackle. I just don't see a scenario where Jed Wills comes back. I think he'll land somewhere. I think he can play somewhere and start somewhere. There hasn't been a coach to get through to him to get him to play at that fever pitch high level yet. And they had Bill Callahan, and he wasn't able to do it. So maybe he'll never be able to do it. But so that's part of it. And then the other bottom line is, and I mentioned it earlier, he's the first pick of Andrew Berry's 10 years as general manager, number 10 overall pick, and he's going to have to count as a miss because, yes, he started 57 games to this point, and he was okay, and he played on 2 playoff teams, but you don't sign him to a second contract, and he never came close to living up to that number 10 pick.
All right, I think we've hit it all except for prediction time. Unless you got anything else, I'm ready to move on to the Saints.
Yeah, we're good, Chad. I'm trying to get this thing written today about like looking back at the first 9 games. Kind of the Browns at the bye, and it's really just a lot of negativity. Which I think we've covered pretty hard. Let me ask you real quick: what do you think the best moment from before the bye week was?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, I mean, without a doubt, beating the Ravens. I mean, that whole game just with the Jimmy Donovan scenario and how magical that was, getting that win was just incredible. I'm trying to think what else could contend with it. I'm trying to remember, Scott, because it's been so much bad. I guess, the best thing for me to do is pull up the schedule to have a memory of, the whole entire season. So, I don't think that win in Jacksonville was like such an amazing win that we're going back with amazing memories. The Cowboys game was just such a disaster. And now look at them this year. I would say the worst moment was the loss back-to-back Giants-Raiders. That Giants loss was really, really ugly because they had just beaten Jacksonville. You're 1-1, and you think that you win here, you go 2-1 with the Raiders on deck. And it was in that period where you thought you had 3 winnable games in a row. So it's much easier to think of the worst time, right? So that Giants game, and I know I went to that game as a fan. We had a great time with my family, but just the way the defense celebrated that was that was at the interception, and then they celebrated in the end zone, and then just from there it was like, oh my gosh, just terrible. The Raiders. On this podcast, I declared the season over after the Raiders game when they were 1-3. I said the season was over. So that sticks in my head. Yeah, I mean, Scott, help me out here. What could, I mean, Watson gets hurt. What could possibly be better than the Ravens win?
No, you're right. There's nothing. I mean, it's the Ravens win, and Winston came off the bench and played well. Alex Wright had the sack for the safety in that Jacksonville game to get them their other win. Myles Garrett has 3 sacks in 4 plays. Came in a loss last week, but that's a big moment. Nick Chubb comes back. Just the fact that he came back. But that's it.
There's one.
Right? I mean, those are kind of, those are the things you're looking for. You're picking out moments. You're picking out bigger pictures as opposed to a play to remember. I mean, they don't have a play that's 40 yards. So there's not a whole lot of plays to remember. You have two defensive touchdowns, or the block field goal for a touchdown, and a Rodney McLeod fumble recover for your touchdown. But even those, it feels like, oh my gosh, they're not even on offense because the offense has been so bad.
They scored 20 points or more once.
Right. I mean, there's a million bad stats. So, yeah, you're right. You hit the negative ones or the losing streak that started with the Giants game. Watson, the injury, the fan reaction was a bad one. You got, the opener to Dallas.
Yeah.
Hopes are so high, and then they get blown out by a Dallas team that turns out to be not that good. Then you get a couple of plays here and there. The end of the Vegas game where Watson takes a sack on 4th down. Cooper runs the wrong route or improvises, and they don't throw past there. They get the 4th down where earlier, was it the Giants game, where Watson doesn't throw it to Jordan Akins in the flat when he's open. Like those little moments. But yeah, it's just interesting. You flash back, and it's a lot of hard decisions to make when you're trying to find something positive.
They even lost all their preseason games.
Oh my! I forgot about that. There you go.
Wow. Well, and speaking of bad, so they're 2-7. The Saints are 3-7. I'm 5-4. Petrak's 3-6.
Oh. Yeah. All right, you or me first, buddy.
I'll go first. I think I said that I wouldn't predict them to win again this year, but I also said that they needed to win a game before I would predict a win. I can't believe I'm doing this, but the Saints have lost 7 straight until they beat Atlanta. So we're not talking about now. Derek Carr is back, but they're struggling at receiver. They lost 7 straight. I know they beat Atlanta. I think the line, was it only like 1? The Saints are only favored by 1 at home.
Okay, it opened at 2.5. It might have dropped, at least according to one thing I saw. Yeah.
All right, so right now I see it at 1. And if the Browns are going to win 2 more games, I feel like I need to bank this one right off the bat. Man, I can't believe it. I'm going to go Browns 23, Saints 21. The Saints have a bye after the game. So maybe they're going to look at ahead like, hey, we want to get to that bye, man. We're excited to take a week off, and they just kind of overlook the Browns. I know, I might change it. Maybe by the weekend I'll send a tweet out with the podcast back on. I'll be like, hey, I'm changing my mind, but call me crazy, Scott. 23-21 Browns.
Okay, I can't call you crazy, Chud. Yeah, I'm torn. Derek Carr's pretty good. I mean, he's up and down, but he has moments and he can make plays. I thought that was a good win for them last week. Atlanta had been playing pretty well. Obviously, the Saints hadn't been. But it could be just a bump. You go interim coach, you get a little bit of a bump there. Saints, I mean, they got Alvin Kamara, got Taysom Hill. I don't see a whole lot outside those guys. They got a couple pass rushers, Chase Young and Cam Jordan. I'm going to go Browns, Chud. I see that they can get a little post-bye bump. Kevin Stefanski, maybe he's got a message for him. Maybe they found a couple things at the bye week get the run game going. I think that's been an issue for this team since the beginning of the year. Maybe they can figure that out. I think, weird things happen in New Orleans. I've covered some games down there. Covered the game where Drew Brees, the Browns went in and beat Drew Brees. Fujita had touchdowns, I think. David Bowens had touchdowns. It's a crazy game. They had the fake punt. Reggie Hodges runs forever. Weird stuff happens in New Orleans, on the field, outside the field. Give me Browns. I think we're going to have some points in this game, Chud. I don't know why I think so. Give me Browns 28-27.
Wow. The way you were acting when I predicted them to win, I thought you were kind of being like, what are you doing?
No, well, I was going to call you crazy. And I'm like, well, I can't call you crazy because I'm going to pick them to win too. So.
Right. Well, and Jameis is going against his former team.
Yes, there's that. Yep. Joe Woods,
So
the Browns know Joe Woods is calling plays now as a coordinator, defensive coordinator. Browns know him. I mean, anybody could win this game. If the Browns, they could lose. They've lost all year long. But let's go the bye. The Browns figured something out over the bye week. Come out, have some enthusiasm coming out of the bye and get a win. Let's go with that.
I'm not sure if they figured anything out, but I'll still predict them to win. But how about that? We're both going Browns.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right, well,
then we got the quick turnaround to a Thursday nighter. So
that's right. All right, I'm gonna go take a nap. And are you gonna try to hit a golf course, even though it's a little chilly?
It's a little chilly. I'm gonna try to get that at the bye week. I didn't get it done like I normally do over the weekend, so I'm gonna try to get that done today.
Okay. I just had a pin.
Yep, you can look for that at brownzone.com. Hopefully it'll be up. Hopefully up late this afternoon. That's the goal. So maybe tomorrow morning. But thank you, Chud, Thank you, Chud, as always. Appreciate the getting you for the extra pod during the bye week. I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.